We sold it to Autodesk. I say we. I had a co-founder, Jesse Peterson, one of the best people I've ever met in my life. We sold to Autodesk for $275 million in January of 2019. I stayed on for 2 years as VP of Construction Strategy at Autodesk.
Was there a defining moment when you realized that BuildingConnected had the potential to become the success that it ended up being?
I know the exact moment. It was when we bid out the first project and about 100 subcontractors created an account. I know exactly where I was. I was in the basement of WeWork on 2nd Street. There was a keg, and I started drinking a lot of beer, and I celebrated.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what would you say to yourself now if you were again trying to get the product from not having lots of customers and product, but not paying customers, to the product where customers pay for it? What's your advice to yourself?
It's also a huge risk, right? Where the customers actually turn around and be like, yeah, we're not paying. Yeah. Like we saw it with Flux.
So our philosophy on the product at the time was, we're not taking anything away, but if you want more, then you have to opt into it. Our biggest issue was our free product was so good that people were like, even though they wanted what we had, the incremental value, they didn't want to pay the value we charged.
So you gave away too much.
Gave away a little too much. I think in hindsight, we actually never had to do free from the beginning. Our product was so much better than any other product in the market. We actually didn't have to do free. Well, touching the field side, highly competitive. There is a lot of tools out there. There's a beast called Procore. There's a beast called Autodesk. There's just a ton of competition. And so I wouldn't even know what I'd want to do, what problem I'd want to solve. And I want to solve big problems.
How you guys met? Was it like...
It was arranged marriage.
Yeah.
Arranged marriage. His name's John Fish.
Were you standing in the toilet, like just talking to each other, like, oh yeah, cool, sounds good, walking down the corridor?
And frankly, when I went into pre-construction, it was because it was my ability, one, to solve the toughest problems, and two, to actually influence how a building was designed and built. Versus when I was in operations and you're working a plan that was preset. If you really want to have change on how something is done, go up the river to where it starts. And that's why I went into pre-con.
Welcome, guys. So this is a super series where we sit down with construction tech's most exceptional companies and founders. So today we're joined by Dustin, co-founder and CEO of Ediphi, and Mike, co-founder and CTO of Ediphi, for a comprehensive deep dive on Ediphi and how you plan to shake up the future of pre-construction and estimating. We'll explore both of your stories, an overview of the current market, Ediphi's vision for pre-construction, and we'll end on how you both view building construction tech companies. So episode 1 is all about the founders' stories, Dustin's BuildingConnected success to Mike's transition from traditional construction roles. Martin?
Dustin, so you have quite a unique background, having degrees both in mechanical engineering and astronautical engineering, right?
Aeronautical
engineering. Yes, that's right. So what made you switch from pursuing those and getting into construction and construction technology?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was intentional. It was completely not. I mean, when you go to college and you sign up for degrees, you don't actually know what they mean or what you want to do. And then you start studying the fields, and then you get down to your 3rd, 4th year, and it's too late to switch. So when I finished those degrees, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I took a job in construction and never left. So I wish I could say it was intentional. It wasn't. Life just takes you down a path, and you just kind of react and respond accordingly.
What made you stay in construction rather than trying to?
That's a good question. I think construction's fascinating. It's actually tangible. So my first job was at Bechtel, and then when Bechtel wanted to send me to Libya, I left. And my first real project was an $80 million medical office building. And to see that go up and to see some of the things that you're building that provides benefits to society is super cool. Actually, that project had a really interesting situation that I'm kind of proud of. There was a NICU, or not a NICU, but a PD oncology. And So young kids are going to be treated for cancer there. And so we what was designed for the audiovisual system was just inadequate. So we like redid all the designs without I basically just worked with audiovisual guys. So it was like you get to have like an impact, and not a lot of careers do you get to see that. Like if you do sales, cool, I closed a deal, but what did that do? And so construction is really special in that regard.
How did you? You obviously had some previous success with BuildingConnected.
Yeah.
So how did that all come about?
Okay, so the story behind BuildingConnected, I worked in construction for 5 years or so, and I was living in Palo Alto. This is circa 2011. And when you live in Palo Alto in 2011, like the startup VC community was kind of like exploding. Like the venture capital was funding a lot of enterprise startups. And you couldn't help but like start researching, start reading TechCrunch. And so I just started reflecting on the space I knew and like drawing parallels to what I was seeing in the market and how they could apply to construction. So I came up with a thesis, and the thesis was construction, this is true, construction is the most collaborative and the most fragmented industry in the world. I think there's a couple other ones that are relatable, one of them being actually the aviation industry or automotive industry. Both of those would be very similar. But because construction is highly collaborative and highly fragmented, if we could build a network to facilitate communication, it would be a lot easier for people to select who works on projects. So like how this materializes is, at the time, every general contractor maintained a subcontractor database of every vendor they could communicate with. But you could have 50 GCs working in one market. So it's actually a lot of duplicate effort in order to communicate with the same people. And so that's where a network would facilitate and make communication a lot easier. So that was what we wanted to make BuildingConnected, the network for facilitating all communication, which in and of itself isn't that innovative. I think that what BuildingConnected did, which was innovative, is figure out a way to onboard the entire industry. And so BuildingConnected started by providing a free layer of communication. Any GC could invite their subcontractor to bid, which is a necessity in our industry, for free. The subcontractor created a profile for themselves and their business. Plus, we'd learn what kind of projects they want to work on and what kind of scopes they would like to be invited to bid for. And so that's how we were able to grow BuildingConnected to the largest bid management service and then qualification service in the United States and Canada. Yeah, it was a long ride. I mean, we could go into the trials and the stress behind starting a company, but I'm very proud of the work we did and the team we built and all the employees that were there.
And successfully you sold it?
We sold it to Autodesk. I say we. I had a co-founder, Jesse Peterson, one of the best people I've ever met in my life. Sold to Autodesk for $275 million in January of 2019. I stayed on for 2 years as VP of Construction Strategy at Autodesk. Autodesk also bought another tool, PlanGrid, right at the same time. So it was a crazy time in that they had tools that they were working on. They had PlanGrid, they had BuildingConnected, and they also purchased recently, like 6 months before, a tool called Assemble. So we had to figure out how to integrate everyone, which is very challenging to do. We have different sales motions, we have different product infrastructure, backbones, different ICPs. So there was many fun aspects about it. I think that one of the things I found is, big companies aren't as innovative as I'd like to be. And so some of the things I'd like to tackle are better done at the startup level than at the large corporate level. And so I didn't think, so I left just because I love everyone at Autodesk. It's a tremendous company. Some of the things they do is amazing. Yeah, I left after 2 years. I actually had a non-compete, so I couldn't go into construction tech.
Straight away.
I tried doing a hardware software company, which was really cool. It was, we monitored indoor air quality during COVID. It was booming. We grew from 4 million to 21 million in sales in the first year because I took it over. It was an existing company that had been around for like 6 years, but had kind of plateaued. And that went really well. We got up to 5 million a month in sales, and then supply chain really hosed us. I mean, our BOM costs, basically the cost to deliver a product to anywhere in the world, went from $72 to $156, which basically made everything we were retailing it for unsustainable. We also had a commercial product that we had a lot of POs for, but we couldn't do installation because no one would return to work because it got delayed like another year. So
would it survive if there was no supply chain shocks like we had?
Yeah, we would have survived. It's still technically survives, but there's so much debt on the business, it doesn't make it like desirable to stay. So me and one of the co-founders left, and we went from 20 to 80, and I think it's down to 10.
I just wanted to go back for a second to 2011, like you said, that even in Palo Alto, looking at the VC landscape, what did you look at any other construction companies which were becoming tech companies at that time, or there was nothing like that in construction as a construction tech in San Francisco, this area, and you were drawing the analogies from other industries?
Other industries. So there wasn't, at the time, I wasn't aware of any venture capital funded tech companies. There probably was some. At the time in 2013, I remember PlanGrid and Procore had just raised some venture rounds. I think FieldWire actually raised their venture round then. We raised it in our seed round in 2013. So this is like on the precipice of when construction tech funding started coming in. But when I was pitching people in like 2012, they're like, get the fuck out of here. Like, what the hell is construction tech? I had one person at a very prominent fund that literally told me you can never build a business like this. You're going to give away free enterprise software to build a network. I've never heard of it like that. And I said, well, what's wrong with my thesis? And he couldn't pinpoint what was wrong with it. And I said, well, then, maybe if you can't tell me what's wrong with it and it's just a new take, and maybe it can work. No one could ever tell me what was wrong with the idea, so I stuck with it. I went completely broke doing it.
What was why at that time, with construction being relatively new, did an investor, because you said you raised a seed fund, 2012 was it?
I raised a seed fund I raised a seed round in 2013.
2013. So why, someone obviously took, maybe we can call it a bet at the time, why?
So in 2012, I had pitched a lot of VCs, heard no from everyone. Like I've heard no as many times as any founder could possibly imagine. So I realized I had to show at least traction. I was trying to pitch before we had actual customers using it and showing the free concept was viable. And so what I did was I wrote a bunch of VCs, cold emails, and I said, hey, here's my thesis on commercial construction. Here's what we're gonna go do on the next 6 months. If I do these things, will you sit down and does this seem something like it's interesting to you? And one of the VCs, Homebrew, Hunter Walk, amazing guy, amazing venture fund. If you guys can lucky enough to raise capital from them, highly recommend it. Took me up on that. I don't know, I think I might still be their only cold email that they've invested in. I don't know, we'll have to ask them. And he goes, this is a very novel way to approach a venture fund. So I did those things, and then I came back to him. And then he actually reached out to another firm that I had pitched called Freestyle. And because I was gonna wanna raise more capital than they were gonna wanna put in, so they co-led the round with Freestyle. We even had Darren Bechtel at Brick and Mortar come in. This was before Brick and Mortar even existed. We had a B Partners actually come in. They were a very, very new fund at the time. So we actually ended up assembling a great round. There's some notable individuals. In fact, Zach Aarons joined the round. Yeah, we had some great people join.
Built a bit of a movement there.
Yeah.
Was there a defining moment when you realized that BuildingConnected had the potential to become the success that it ended up being?
I know the exact moment. It was when we bid out the first project and about 100 subcontractors created an account. I know exactly where I was. I was in the basement of WeWork on 2nd Street. There was a keg, and I started drinking a lot of beer, and I celebrated. I was like, all I have to do is replicate this like 100,000 times now. But if you can do it once, you can do it again. GCs constantly have projects, and yeah, it worked perfectly.
Well, so 100 people signed up on one
for
day?
that project.
For that project. Oh, okay. Interesting. So this was like proof that what you had built, actually, I suppose, had legs.
It had legs. It proved that if you can build this mechanism for onboarding, and onboarding is the hardest thing, because a lot of these, the crux was, would subcontractors actually create a profile? Like, these people don't actually want to do it, but they did. They went through that process in order to get something of value, which was, hey, I can extract these documents in order to potentially win work.
Was it because the promise? Like, why did they? I know obviously you spent some time looking at this and like creating something that was great and easy, for, I guess, intuitive for people to onboard. But was there like a promise that to say, yeah, if you sign up, you're going to be bidding on projects that are like, I don't know.
No, so we prided ourselves on just being a communication layer at the time. The GC that was using us, SC Builders, was the first GC to bid out a project. They knew all the subcontractors. We were purely a mechanism for them to distribute the documents, tell them about the projects, tell them about when they need the bids due, and also track their coverage across all the bid packages. So knowing how many electrical contractors are going to participate and provide them numbers back. And then for them to correspond any addendum changes or any sort of like updates to the project. So that was our value add to SC Builders, which was they would be able to facilitate the communication, the tracking, and then any additional messaging through one system for free. And then subcontractors, they knew who SC Builders is. They like to work with them because they're a great contractor. Would be able to come there, get the project files that they need in order to provide them a quote back.
And was it a straight line from there till the exit?
No. Oh my God. If it's a straight, like there's very few companies that have a straight line, and like we were not one of them. I mean, so Mike and I were talking about this at breakfast. There's very few companies that grow like this or grow like this. Like a lot of startups grow actually like stepping stones, right? Because like you get to one milestone and that works for a while, then you realize you have to reach the next milestone. So we started and our platform was completely free. So we had one KPI at BuildingConnected. It was getting a general contractor to active. And we defined active as they've used us to bid out 3 projects. And we knew through data over time that if you got active, over the lifetime of BuildingConnected, we had like a 90% cohort retention. That means that every GC that bid out 3 projects continued to bid out projects on BuildingConnected. So for a long time we were free. I would even quota my sales team, which they didn't sell anything, they gave away free software, on how many GCs they could get active. And I'd pay them a commission based upon just purely the number of active they got. But then we had to convert from a free solution to actually start making money. Now, that's a different muscle. It takes time to develop those muscles. So that was a challenge. Actually, like one of the biggest challenges was after we had raised our Series A on 0 in revenue, and we had said we weren't going to immediately start focusing on revenue. And then in 2015, so we raised our seed in March of 2013, our A in March of 2014. Coming into 2015, we had plenty of cash, but the venture market got like really spooked at the time. And so our investors wanted us to just raise some more capital to have like a quote unquote slush fund. And we weren't prepared. It was one of the worst fundraisers I've ever done. I've probably raised like 8 or 9 rounds now. It was the worst fundraise I've ever done. I wasn't prepared. I was uncomfortable going to the market. And we got a term sheet. It was actually technically a down round. And so we signed the term sheet. I was like really bummed. I was like, no, we executed on everything we said. We had a plan. Sure, the market changed, but our plan shouldn't have changed. And so that was really, really tough because I was like, I don't want to do a down round. So remember, I slept on it that night and then I came back to the office because we had like 60,000 subcontractors active on BuildingConnected.
Being profitable or not at that time?
No. We had some revenue, but very little. And what we started doing was pressure testing what the subcontractor community might pay for. And we got a lot of positive feedback. I'm talking surveying thousands of subcontractors that are interacting with us. And I went back to my investors and said, I want to not go through with this round. So I'm canceling a term sheet I signed, which is terrible. And instead, Darren Bechtel at Brick and Mortar actually just said, we're just going to do an extension of the Series A so you have more time to start realizing some of your revenue growth. And that worked really well. And it propelled us to our Series B. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what would you say to yourself now if you were again trying to get the product from not having lots of customers and product, but not paying customers, to the product where customers pay for it What's your advice to
There's also a
yourself?
huge risk, right, where the customers actually turn around and be like, "Yeah, we're not paying." Like we saw it with Flux.
So our philosophy on the product at the time was, we're not taking anything away, but if you want more, then you have to opt into it. Our biggest issue was our free product was so good that people were like, even though they wanted what we had, the incremental value, they didn't want to pay the value we'd charge.
So you gave away too much.
Gave away a little too much. I think in hindsight, we actually never had to do free from the beginning. Our product was so much better than any other product in the market. We actually didn't have to do free. I was naive in, I was naive in, even if you have a free product, how quickly they would switch. And so I don't think the velocity would have distracted from what we wanted to accomplish. I think we could have, one of the things that was helpful though, with free products, we could onboard and have a network, which would make the next GC easier to bring in that market. So I think we could have came into markets and said, you'll have the first 12 months free, like a grace period. So that's probably something that we should have done.
Okay. So being a second-time founder, you had a luxury to choose what you want to work on, right?
Luxury.
Why did you decide to go into a construction and working on back office solution rather than on the field solution, for example?
Well, touching the field side, highly competitive. There is a lot of tools out there. There's a beast called Procore. There's a beast called Autodesk. There's just a ton of competition. And so I wouldn't even know what I'd want to do, what problem I'd want to solve. And I want to solve big problems. And so that's just, I don't know what competitive differentiation I can offer the market. I spent my career talking to people in pre-construction. I think there's very few companies out there, whether they use it or not, who haven't heard of BuildingConnected. So I feel like I have a huge competitive advantage dealing with in the pre-construction landscape. There was also just an opportunity that presented itself. Mike had actually been working on Ediphi a lot longer. And the things that Mike was doing were the things I was proposing, even when I was at Autodesk, that we should be working on. And so I always believed that the next big SaaS solution, SaaS company, is going to be a pre-construction company, because we don't have one right now. And we don't have one because estimating has not moved to the cloud. That is the most important thing we do in pre-construction. We sign a contract based upon the numbers in the estimate. That's a schedule of values. And the fact is, this is done in Excel or desktop applications. But if we can make estimating in the cloud, then everything else is an input to finalize that estimate and get to a GMP. And so the thesis is, if you are the estimating solution, then you are the platform for all of pre-con. And I also think that people, like, we talked about a lot of BuildingConnected, and we never did it, but we talked about like phase bidding, because like you might invite people to bid for budgeting purposes. And that's what Mike did a really good job of thinking about estimating. And I say it a lot, estimating is not an event, it's a process. It's part of the pre-con process. And you just estimate different ways using different methods, depending on how far you are along the design process, right? And so, but they're connected. You want to understand how things change. And so that takes a different architecture. So it's not just moving it to estimate tools to the cloud, but it's providing a framework to take you and help you provide what is the cost across every step away of pre-construction, which is really different.
I suppose now is probably a nice time to bring Mike into the frame. So Mike, Dustin, maybe you were working with Suffolk at the time.
Suffolk Technologies.
Suffolk Technologies. Maybe you could just describe like that role and then how that led to you meeting Mike. Because Mike, you were also at Suffolk.
Yeah.
But you were building it as an internal tool, as far as
It was originally built as an internal tool. I had been wanting to offer it to the market, but it wasn't until I met Dustin that we really had the opportunity. I remember pitching to him actually, my idea, right? And it was just back, I don't know, March or February or something? February of 2020.
March.
Yeah.
23?
23.
Yeah. So how you guys met? Was it like?
It was arranged marriage.
Yeah.
Arranged marriage.
His name's John Fish.
Were you standing in the toilet, like just talking to each other, like, oh yeah, cool, sounds good, walking down the corridor?
Well, you were hired to be a partner at Suffolk Tech, right?
I was hired to be a principal in the first fund. Yeah. So Suffolk Technologies was just raising their first venture fund. It's $110 million. So it's not a Suffolk fund. They have independent limited partners. So I was hired to join the venture fund. But while I joined the venture fund, Mike was working on internal tooling, and that became more intriguing to me than the investing role. So, we started working together, came up with a plan, and 6 months later, we just spun out Ediphi. We had to buy the IP off of Suffolk Construction, so we're completely autonomous in that regard. Suffolk Technologies led our seed round, so the venture fund led the seed round, and we were off and running.
Mike, in your background, it sounds like you were building something quite technical with Ediphi, but previously you were in project management?
Yeah, well, I have a 20-year career in construction. About half that time is in project management. I actually started in California as an assistant superintendent, traveling all over the place, but quickly made it to PM, and I did that for about 10 years, and then I went into estimating, pre-construction. Yeah, I actually was a home builder for a period of time during the recession. When I came back, I decided to get into pre-construction.
And so when did you make the jump, and maybe how did you make the jump from like traditional construction roles, like on-site, cold site office, to a nice warm office building software?
I've had some funky offices over the years, yeah, for sure. Some of them in the skyline over here, but from day one, I had always found opportunities to work on technology. I mean, the reality is there's a lot of monotony in the management of construction projects. So from day one, it was something I had an affinity towards and had worked on. And even before I got the budget approval to start Ediphi back in February 2018, I had already done some things that had sort of accidentally scaled across Suffolk's organization. Accidentally, and then that I didn't really try.
Are these your Excels?
Yeah, a lot of automated Excel. Really, yeah, a lot of automated Excel add-ins and the such. And so then I realized the limits of that real quick, right? But I had done enough for people to at least listen to me when I said, let's build our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Mike, how is it to be a CTO of a construction tech startup?
It's a wild ride, and I'm trying to remember to enjoy it. Having Dustin as a partner really helps, right? Because he's
experienced. It's everything you thought, right?
It's way harder than you'd imagine for anyone who's imagining it.
Now I can tell who arranged a marriage.
Yeah, but it's a load of fun. It's to realize a dream. It's worth the effort.
Mm. Do you think there's like a trend? I suppose it's kind of like you moved to estimating, but it's kind of rare to hear people from an estimating background go into like technology tools. A lot of people from the field or engineering or something typically end up in, like, not typically, but can go to these roles. Estimators are sort of just, I suppose, viewed as people that just got their head down, counting stuff and pricing. Do you think this is do you know anyone else that's in a similar position, or do you think it's a trend, or are there more people interested?
We're out there. There's people, hopefully, who are watching this. We're out there. And we're all joining together. We're going to fix some of these problems that we've had for a long time. I'm not alone. And frankly, when I went into pre-construction, it was because it was my ability, one, to solve the toughest problems, and two, to actually influence how a building was designed and built. Versus when I was in operations and you're working a plan that was preset. If you really want to have change on how something is done, go up the river to where it starts. And that's why I went into pre-con. So, it was, the challenges are there, and then you realize that the beachhead of technology is pre-con as well. It's really where you can make an impact. So I've always had that interest in me.
It's interesting. I'm curious, how do you both combine your skill set when building the company?
Well, it took some adjustment. It was an arranged marriage, but we work really well together. We complement each other. Listening is a big part of it too, right? We have different contexts, and in aggregate, those can be very powerful when they're shared. We have different insights, and in aggregate, when they're compared, there can be a lot of great ideas. And if you think you have the answer, you're probably a little too close-minded. So right? Because, right, and so, yeah, and for the most part, like I'm product design and engineering, and you're with sales and go to market and customer success, but in HR, yeah, and I guess I'm kind of doing the IT thing, right? It's crazy, but we will cross-pollinate on those things for sure, and I think the sharing of the ideas makes us stronger.
So I would like to know one piece of advice for a healthy relationship between CTO and CEO from you and from you.
Well, I guess I'll start. Talk to the person. I mean, I know a lot about his personal life. I'm here for him if he needs me. And so know that there's a relationship there. And then when it's issues, talk about the issues and be okay with conflict, right? Be okay with going at something, but making sure that something is the actual topic at hand, getting a shared understanding. And I know for sure we want the same things. Sometimes we argue, we know we want the same things, right? And so long as you're willing to engage, you come out better.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else to add. I mean, if you're co-founders and you don't argue, I don't believe your business is like going to be very good. Like there is just no way about it. So it's fine to have those arguments as long as you realize it's because you both want the company to do well.
Yeah.
And then you can't just be there for the business. You got to be there for each other.
Yeah, that's true. You put everything that you have into it. So it's hard to break out personal from business. It's all in.
There's late night WhatsApp messages.
Yeah.
Wake up in the morning and you're like, whew, got some shit to sort.
He's heard me cry.
I heard a good saying once. It says, conflict avoided is conflict multiplied.
I love that one. Yeah.
Sticks to me. Mike, how is it transition? Like, how do you, I'm always curious to understand how people like shift their mindset, like maybe unlearn a little bit of their ways of working in a construction field versus in technology, because just totally different ways of working, right? Technology is about fast iteration, like how quickly can we iterate and move things forward, whereas construction is like probably slower, safe, and those kind of things. Is there anything that sticks with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's agile versus waterfall, really. Right, like in construction, it's like, I will do that $400 million project for you. It will take 24 months. This is the guaranteed maximum price, right? And you say, sign on the line, and you agree on all those things. And software is not that. Obviously, you have to have some sort of a plan. You have to have some sort of a future state you're going after, but you have to be willing to adjust and to change, right? And I think the biggest challenge that I had starting in 2018 when I was building this, and I had a 6-month runway at first with like a $500,000 budget, was to produce something and to communicate to a company that was willing to, at the time, like I had just worked on the casino, it was a $1.5 billion project. Like a company that was willing to sign on the dotted line on $1.5 billion projects and say, we will do this. And then tell them, yeah, we'll do this, but things might change. I can try to work that agile into that waterfall mindset was challenging. Yeah. Right, and ultimately what it comes down to is people just want predictability. And it's less about the end result, and it's more about managing expectation and providing that predictability.
Is Ediphi providing predictability?
I think that's ultimately what we're trying to offer to the industry is predictability. Like people often say to me, oh, with estimating, was it more accurate? It's like, I don't know if it's more accurate because things change as the project evolves while you try to find that optimal sort of programming of the design. And so it's less about that, it's more about predictability. And I think that what we offer to the market is just that. Right? That's probably the key word we're after.
I think before we maybe jump into a little bit of like why you dedicated your life to fixing this pre-construction problem, I'm curious, obviously you guys were at Suffolk, you met at Suffolk, yeah. Suffolk are an investor in what you guys do. Like what is Suffolk's role in, like broadly speaking, in facilitating innovation within the construction industry? It seems to me, like looking from the outside here, obviously we're inside their office now, but they have like a lot of good startups. They have a very good ecosystem around that. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'll address that. So Suffolk is purely just an investor now. Suffolk Technologies, the venture fund, is just an investor. And we're here for their investor day, which is on Wednesday, where they're gonna go through their accelerator program and all the companies are gonna present to. There's other builders going to be here. There's other investors going to be here. So there's going to be a lot of people here to see a new cohort of innovators. So other than being a customer, there is some financial stake in us doing well, in that they advise us on product, and they directionally tell us where we want to go. But some of our other customers, they get the same benefit. So I think the biggest difference is there is a sense of pride, because this was originally started internally with seeing Ediphi be successful, because I know the owner of Suffolk, John Fish, wants to contribute back, and he talks about how there is fundamental problems with construction. We need to do it more efficiently across the board. We need the tools in pre-con to help make decisions more quickly. We were talking about it before, like, we should understand if a project's feasible very fast, not spend a bunch of money on designs and then realize, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to make the owner's objectives, whether it costs too much or it just can't be done. And so the tooling right now isn't available, and some of the things Ediphi is doing should help make pre-construction better, which will help make the industry better. So I think it's just wanting to support us from a sense of giving back.
So what's the thesis of Ediphi? We'll talk about what do you guys do with an Ediphi a little bit more on the next episode. But
do you want me to take the thesis? Yeah. Well, so let me put it to you this way. First, as far as the thesis, I think first we need to mount it on top of a problem. And I think that the problem is some persistent inefficiencies in the construction industry. And Dustin was talking about how there's a lot of competition in the field. And actually, like, if you look at the first project I was the senior on getting the deal signed, $100 million, and it was 18 months to build and 30 months of pre-construction. So, there's all this crowded space in the 18 months, and then in the 30 months, where there's lots of carry costs and escalation risk and all this pain, there's not as much solution. And that's where I think we can actually shrink that 30 months down. That's where I think we can actually really get more jobs in the ground faster if we shrink that down. So that's the problem, I would say, of why we exist. And then it ultimately comes, how do we solve that? And that's the thesis part. How do we solve that problem and get that down? I think it ultimately comes down to decisions. I think, like, I used to complain an architect wouldn't give me the designs. The architect would complain the owner wasn't given a decision. The owner would complain I wasn't answering his questions on what if we did this and that. So if we can speed up the flow of those decisions by providing a paradigm, which I believe we provide, that allows those answers to be, or those questions to be answered sort of on demand, quickly, decisions go faster, process goes faster, 30 months comes down, more jobs in the ground.
Is it mostly communication problem then?
It's a communication problem, but the data hinders people. The data's a mess right now, right? And we talk about AI, we've got all sorts of AI plans, but it's like data needs to be solved first, right? It's siloed, everyone has their own classifications of the same underlying data. I mean, a concrete slab's a concrete slab, right? And so it is communication, but the stakeholders, yes, they all need to be in the same place, but also they need to be in the same place and the same data in a paradigm that scales. Yeah.
Cool. I do just have one more on this. As you mentioned, you were building it internally here, and I don't think we'll get to ask this later, which is why I want to ask it now. But what was the first thing you built with Ediphi? Like, what was the first feature you was like, right? Because it had to start somewhere.
Actually, it's funny. The very first thing was single sign-on, actually, because I wasn't. I know. I used to argue over that. We used to argue. I know. We used to argue over that.
I built single sign-on and some admin controls.
I literally, but I wanted to know that it was possible. I had so many of the incumbent estimating solutions saying that they couldn't, and it was pissing me off. I just wanted to know that it was possible, right? And it wasn't even what it is today, like our authentication service and all that, like not even close. I just wanted to know we could, right? Once I knew that we could, yeah, it became about replacing, at the time we were using Excel and MC squared. It was about replacing the bare bones tools that people were using, like a unit price catalog of scope, like line items of an estimate having multiple different categories and everything to them.
If there's any potential founders listening, do not start with single sign-on. Do not start with single sign-on.
Yeah. It was almost like your validation, though, right? It was like, we can do this.
Well, and it was like, and basically in February I started. September was the first time we kind of went go live, and I didn't want separate credentials. I wanted the employees' credentials to be used to log into the application. I don't think I would have done it if it wasn't internal.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you. This is the end of episode 1, and in episode 2, we'll be going a little bit about the current landscape of pre-construction, and we'll hone in on estimating and looking at why today's tech tools don't quite hit the mark, and your guys' thoughts on this. So I'm looking forward to the juice.
Sweet.
So one just quick example of a tool to help on that. If you bring in a line item on our platform, you can right click on it and see what everyone else thought that was worth on their project within that context and how many square feet and when was it and who did it, right? It's that sort of crowdsourcing that Dustin was just talking about that become the tools that empower people to be better at making judgment calls.
Dustin, you mentioned something in a previous episode about this notion of cloud-based. So perhaps we could talk about some of the current estimating tools that are on the market and available, and how bad is it?